Mars and the Sun are doing opposite things in the sky today. I want to walk you through both because the combination produces something I have only seen a handful of times, and understanding how it works changes what you do with it. Mars is squaring Uranus. That is the most disruptive aspect in classical astrology. A 90-degree collision between the planet of action and the planet of upheaval. When Mars squares Uranus, things break. Plans shatter. Patience evaporates. The impulse to act first and think later becomes almost physical. If you have been feeling a strange, restless aggression today, an urge to burn something down, to quit, to confront, to shove through an obstacle by force, that is Mars-Uranus. It is not personal, it is planetary weather. But at the same time, in the same sky, the Sun is conjuncting the North Node at 8 degrees Pisces. The Sun illuminating the point of direction, purpose, evolutionary trajectory. When the Sun meets the North Node, there is a flash of clarity about where you are supposed to be heading. Not destiny in the mystical sense, direction in the practical sense. A momentary alignment between who you are and where the current is trying to carry you. One transit says destroy. The other says align. And they are both happening right now, today, inside Mercury retrograde, inside the Pisces field we have been swimming in all week. That is the paradox. And paradoxes are where the interesting information lives. All week we have been tracking a building sequence. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction on February 20th delivered structural clarity. Mercury stationed retrograde on February 25th and began testing whether you could hold that clarity while the communication channel scrambled. Yesterday I walked you through the Pisces immersion effect, the underwater sensation that has been making everything feel dense and dreamlike. And now today, Mars-Uranus drops a bolt of electricity into the water, while the Sun-Node alignment points a spotlight at the exit. The sequence is accelerating. Stay with me on this. Let me unpack Mars square Uranus first, because most content about this aspect focuses on the wrong thing. Most astrology content frames Mars-Uranus as chaos. Expect the unexpected, technology breakdowns, arguments, accidents, road rage. And those surface-level manifestations are real. Mars-Uranus does correlate with sudden eruptions and impulsive action. But the mechanism underneath is more specific and more useful than generic chaos warnings. Mars represents directed energy. What you do, how you fight, where you spend your force. Uranus represents the pattern that needs to break, the structure that has outlived its function, the habit that served you once and now constrains you. When Mars squares Uranus, your directed energy collides with the thing that needs to break. The collision feels violent because breaking always does. But not all breaking is destruction. Some breaking is liberation. A bone that healed crooked has to be rebroken to be set properly. A wall that was built in the wrong place has to come down before the room works. Mars-Uranus does not care about comfort. It cares about accuracy. And it achieves accuracy through disruption. Here is where most people get into trouble with this aspect. They feel the impulse to break something, and they either suppress it completely or they act on it blindly. Neither works. Suppressing Mars-Uranus stores the energy, and it detonates later, usually at a worse time, in a worse context, aimed at a worse target. I have watched this happen repeatedly. Someone feels the voltage of the square, decides to be responsible, and sit on it, and 3 days later explodes at their partner over something trivial because the Mars energy had nowhere to go. The charge does not disappear when you ignore it. It migrates. It finds the weakest wall and punches through. Acting blindly on Mars-Uranus is equally destructive, but faster. The energy chooses its own target, and the energy is not known for its precision. You quit the job when you meant to renegotiate the contract. You end the friendship when you meant to address a single boundary. You send the message that says everything you feel and nothing you mean. Blind action during Mars-Uranus creates the very chaos that the aspect is blamed for. But the aspect is not chaotic by nature. It is forceful. And force without direction is chaos, while force with direction is power. The thing that works with Mars-Uranus, and this is something I have tested across multiple activations of this aspect in my own life and in the charts I track, is what I think of as controlled demolition. A controlled demolition is not chaos. It is the deliberate application of force to a specific target that has already been identified as needing to come down. The building is condemned. The engineers have mapped the structural weaknesses. The charges are placed precisely. The detonation is timed. And what falls is exactly what was meant to fall, while everything around it remains standing. That is the skill of Mars-Uranus. Not blind destruction, targeted release. The question is not, should I break something today? The question is, what specifically has been identified as needing to come down? And can I apply force to that target without collateral damage? Now layer in the Sun conjunct North Node, because this is where the paradox becomes navigable. The Sun Node conjunction is not about destiny. I know that word gets used constantly in astrology content, and I find it counterproductive. Destiny implies you have no choice, that the path is fixed, that something outside of you has predetermined where you go. That is not what the North Node represents in any functional model of astrology I have encountered. The North Node is a direction vector. It points toward the area of life where growth is available. Not guaranteed, available. When the Sun conjuncts the North Node, your identity, your will, your conscious self briefly aligns with that growth direction. You can feel which way the wind is blowing. You can sense which door is open. It does not last. The conjunction is a flash, not a floodlight. But in that flash, you can see the landscape clearly enough to orient. I want to give you a practical sense of what this looks like because the language around the North Node tends to be abstract, and abstraction is not useful today. The Sun Node conjunction at 8 degrees Pisces illuminates the Pisces territory of your life. That means the area governed by intuition, compassion, creative surrender, connection to something larger than your individual will. For some of you, that is a relationship where you have been holding back from full vulnerability. For others, it is a creative project that requires you to let go of controlling the outcome and trust the process of making it. For others still, it is a spiritual or psychological shift that has been building underneath the surface for months, and today, the sun briefly lights it from above so you can see the shape of it. The North Node does not tell you what to do. It shows you where the growth is. And in Pisces, growth almost always requires releasing control rather than gaining it. That is uncomfortable for most people. especially on a day when Mars-Uranus is simultaneously demanding forceful action. Release and force. Surrender and demolition. Both at once. That is the paradox. Here is where the paradox resolves. Mars-Uranus tells you what needs to break. Sun node tells you what direction the breaking serves. Without the Sun node conjunction, Mars-Uranus is just a wrecking ball. Powerful, but aimless. Without Mars-Uranus, the Sun node conjunction is just a nice feeling of alignment that fades by tomorrow. Together, on the same day, they create a window where you can see the direction and feel the force to clear the path. Disruption in service of direction. That is not chaos. That is renovation. Think of it this way. You are standing in a room with a wall that should not be there. You have known it for months. The wall blocks the light. The wall divides the space in a way that does not serve how you actually live. Mars-Uranus hands you the sledgehammer. Sun node shows you which wall. And Mercury retrograde means you cannot explain to anyone else why you are swinging. You just know. And the knowing is enough. And the fact that this is happening inside Mercury retrograde adds a layer that most content will ignore. The renovation is clear. The communication about it is not. You can feel what needs to break, and you can sense where the breaking leads, but explaining it to someone else, justifying it, writing it down in a way that makes linear sense, that part is still scrambled. Which means today is a day for decisive internal action and external silence. Break what needs breaking. Align with the direction you can feel. Do not try to narrate the process to anyone. The narration comes later when Mercury clears. I want to connect this to the sequence because the sequence is the real story. Most channels will cover Mars square Uranus today. They will talk about chaos and disruption and maybe mention the Sun node conjunction as a footnote, but they will cover it as an isolated event, a standalone transit. And isolated transits are like single frames pulled from a film. You can see the image, but you miss the motion. The motion here is extraordinary. February 20th, Saturn meets Neptune. A new structure crystallizes. Something becomes real. February 25th, Mercury stations retrograde. The communication of that new reality gets disrupted. You know what landed, but cannot explain it. February 26th, the Pisces field thickens. The medium around the new structure becomes fluid, dense, dreamlike. And now, today, February 27th, Mars-Uranus provides the force to clear whatever was blocking the new structure from fully landing. And Sun node briefly illuminates the direction the new structure serves. Each transit in the sequence builds on the one before it. Each one adds a layer that changes what the next one does. The conjunction gave you the structure. The retrograde tested your ability to hold it without words. The Pisces immersion tested your ability to trust it without confirmation. And today's double transit gives you the force and the direction to start acting on it. Even though you still cannot explain it clearly. Even though the medium is still water. Even though the communication channel is still scrambled. The action does not need narration. It needs accuracy. There is a detail about today's specific Mars-Uranus square that I want to flag because the degrees matter. Mars is at the final degrees of a sign, which in traditional astrology is called the anaretic degree, the critical degree, the point of maximum urgency. Mars at the anaretic degree does not just want to act. It feels like it has to act now or the window closes. And that urgency is real. There is a window. But urgency and accuracy are not the same thing. The impulse today will be to act immediately on whatever Mars-Uranus is breaking open, to confront the conversation, to send the message, to make the move. And for some of you, the action is correct. What needs to break today. But for others, the urgency is the transit talking, not the situation. The way to tell the difference is the Sun-Node conjunction. If the action you are contemplating aligns with the direction you can feel, the flash of clarity about where you are heading, then the urgency is warranted. Act. If the action you are contemplating does not connect to direction, if it is just anger or frustration seeking a target, then the urgency is Mars at the anaretic degree, and it will pass by Sunday. Do not give permanent expression to temporary voltage. The weekend ahead has a specific shape. Today's double transit peaks by tonight. Mars-Uranus begins separating tomorrow. The urgency drops. The disruption that needed to happen has happened or has not. By Saturday, the field begins to shift from this week's dense Pisces retrograde Mars energy toward the approaching lunar eclipse on March 3rd. The eclipse is 6 days away, and everything this week has been prologue. The conjunction built the structure. The retrograde tested it. The Pisces field immersed it. Today's Mars-Uranus cracked open whatever was in the way, and the eclipse is the event that illuminates what needs to be released for the structure to fully integrate. This entire week has been preparation for one moment. The eclipse is that moment. Let me tell you why this particular eclipse matters more than most. A lunar eclipse happens when the Earth passes between the Sun and the Moon, casting its shadow across the lunar surface. In astrology, eclipses are amplified full moons. They illuminate what needs to end, what needs to be released, what has been carried past its expiration date. This eclipse falls at 12 degrees Virgo, the sign of details, systems, health, daily routine, the practical infrastructure of life. Virgo asks what is working and what is not, what serves the structure and what is dead weight. And a lunar eclipse in Virgo specifically illuminates the dead weight in your systems, the habits that no longer serve, the routines that have become rituals of avoidance, the details you have been obsessing over that do not actually matter, while the details that do matter sit in your blind spot. That is what March 3rd is going to reveal. And the reason I am telling you now, 6 days early, is that eclipse energy does not arrive on the day of the eclipse. It builds. The build started this week. The conjunction planted. The retrograde tested. The Pisces field softened. Mars-Uranus cracked open. And the eclipse will illuminate what remains. Each layer has prepared you for the next. And starting tomorrow, I am walking you through exactly what to expect, how lunar eclipses actually work mechanically, and what the Virgo-Pisces axis means for the specific material this eclipse will surface. Here is where it lands. Today is Paradox Day. Disruption and direction arriving simultaneously. The temptation is to choose one and ignore the other, to focus on what is breaking and miss where the breaking leads, or to fixate on the direction and pretend nothing needs to come down first. The skill is holding both, feeling the force of Mars-Uranus and channeling it toward the target that Sun node illuminated. breaking what needs breaking in the direction of where you are growing. That is not chaos. That is surgery. And the best surgeons are calm while their hands are precise. Do not give permanent expression to temporary voltage. But do not waste the voltage either. Somewhere in your life today, something became obvious that needed to come down. And somewhere else, a direction became briefly visible. The two are connected. They are always connected on days like this. The breaking serves the building. The demolition clears the lot for the next structure. That is the pattern. Stay with me. The eclipse is coming.